Okay, we're moving on to the second part, which is the Deuterostome. So these are part of the kingdom Amelia and a part of the domain Eukarya. So to revisit, last time we kind of talked about the proteasome, so now we're moving into the Deuterostome. So we're going to focus on the echinoderm as well as the chordate, both invertebrate and vertebrate, and then we'll move on to human evolution. So what have we looked at so far? So in the first section, we were focusing more on the parazoa, which, if you recall, was the sponges. And as we're moving along evolution, we then visit the radica, which includes the cnidaria, and then we moved on to the protozoa. So we had covered up to this point. So now we're moving on to the deuterostome, which includes the echinoderm and chordates. So the protozoa and the deuterostome split has to do, if you recall, in the last section, we talked about the blastophore development. And so that's during the embryo development, the first opening will either develop into the mouth, which would be the proteasome, or would develop into the anus, which would be the deuterostome. So previous in the last section, we were looking at protozoa. Now we're going to focus on the deuterostome. So one of the phylum that's included in the deuterostome is Echinodermata. And so these are shiny skin animals. You probably have recognized a lot of them. They include urchin and sea stars and sea cucumber. And for us, because we live so close to Santa Cruz and Monterey and San Francisco, we're lucky because we can often see these animals, especially during low tides. So I would definitely recommend going and visiting that if you haven't done so. So for many of them, their larvae are free-swimming filter feeders, and it's not until they become an adult that they change with regards to their orientation. So as larvae, they're bilateral symmetry, and as they become adult, they become radial symmetry. So recall that when it's radial, we can actually divide it in a circular motion to look at the different planes, and so it's not bilateral where you have like a left and a right. Okay, so their locomotion, most of them are in marine environment, and so their locomotion is through the water vascular system. Many of them have foot that they're able to actually do locomotion through. And so in this video right here, which again I'll link to in my with the video, is showing how some of these echinoderm can move around. Next we have our chordate, and so some of these chordates are invertebrate, but most of them are going to be vertebrate. There are 4 characteristics that we should recognize for chordate, and some of these characteristics we see them in the larva stage, but we don't see them in persisting in the adult state. So the first one is the notochord. So the notochord is a dorsal supporting rod, and we can see the notochord right here in this image of the chordate. And so vertebrates will have an endoskeleton of cartilage or bones. So sharks, for example, are vertebrates, and they will actually have their vertebrate actually be made of cartilage, versus for us, for example, for humans, we have our vertebrate actually be made of bones. Additionally, chordates will have a dorsal. So the dorsal, as we can see here, is a tubular nerve cord. The third characteristic that we are observing is the pharyngeal arches right here, which is the outgrowth of the pharynx, and you will often see this in the back of the throat. And then the last characteristic that's often observed amongst the chordate will be the postanal tail, which is located at the very tip over here. And so here's a picture of all of these different chordates, and so you can see it's quite a variety here, where we have everything from the shark, right, that we kind of mentioned, that has a vertebrae made of cartilage, to like a rabbit, a bird that would be in the class Eve, right? Whereas a rabbit being a class mammal. And so we're going to talk about these different classes later on, but all of these will fall under the chordates, and they will all have these 4 characteristics. So first, let's look at invertebrate chordata. So the invertebrate chordata is going to include these 2 guys right here. This is going to include the tunicates and the lancelet. And so these are both invertebrate chordates. And so the tunicates are these little sea squirts, and they have typical chordate larvae. So you'll see that their larvae is when you actually see the notochord. And while they look like sponges, they are actually chordata. So they're closer ancestry-wise to us than they are to sponges, even though they kind of do look like sponges. Additionally, you can see the adult, the pharyngeal pouch will not be retained except for this pharynx with gill slit. And so as a larva, they have the 4 characteristics that we just discussed, but the adults don't retain all of those characteristics. They're also called sea squirts because they can actually squirt water from their siphon. The next other invertebrate chordates that we're interested in looking at is the lancelet. So the lancelet are the only groups of chordate that actually retains all of the chordate characteristics as adults. And they live in the marine environment, so they live in water. They're typically found in shallow waters. A lot of times they're partially buried in the sand, and they're also filter feeders. So you can see here their filter feeding apparatus. And lastly, they have segmentation. Okay, so these are the 2 invertebrate chordates. Most of the chordata will fall into vertebrates. So the majority of this talk is going to be looking at all the different vertebrates. And so some of the evolutionary trends that we'll kind of see among the chordates is the presence of a vertebrate, right? So we said that can be either cartilage or bone. We'll start seeing the development of the jaw, and then we'll start seeing the development of a bony skeleton. And as we move from water to land, you'll start seeing the development of lungs as well as appendages, joint appendages. And then we'll start seeing as well an adaptation to moving from water to land, the embryonic eggs, and then finally the mammary glands. Okay, so first let's kind of focus on these vertebrates right here, the jawless fish, the cartilage fish, and the bony fish. So across here we can see the development as we're moving along this evolutionary trend here, the development of a vertebrate, the development of a jaw, and the first fishes to actually develop a vertebrate, which, as we mentioned, can be made of either cartilage or bone. First, I kind of want to draw your eyes to here as we look at this jawless fish. You can see that this fish right here does not have a jaw. So here is its mouth on this side. So here's its eyes and here's its mouth. So the first vertebrates were actually jawless fish. And as it developed over time and with evolution, it is believed that the jaws developed from these gill arches right here. So it's believed that this is where the first gill arches was where the development of the jaw start forming. So as we progress here and we move to jawfish, you can see these gillless arch is starting to develop into these jaws. So kind of refocusing on this jawless fish a little bit more. Jawless fishes are typically cylindrical and they can be up to 1 meter long. Their outside tends to be smooth and scaleless, so their skin doesn't tend to have scales in them. They do not have a jaw, nor do they have a paired fin. And there are 2 jawless fish that you might have seen before. The first one's the lamprey. The lamprey oftentimes are parasite. And then another jawless fish that you might have heard of is the hagfish. And the hagfish are actually scavenger. So as I mentioned, here are some of the characteristics of jawless fish, right? They're cylindrical, they do not have jaws. So this guy doesn't have a jaw. And then over here, we have the hagfish here. You can see that it also doesn't have a jaw. It has a very scary looking mouth though, but it doesn't have a jaw. And both the hagfish here and lamprey, you can see has smooth skin. So here are two different videos that you can watch. The first one is on the hagfish, and the second one, the parasitic fish, is actually the lamprey. Okay, so moving on to vertebrate fishes, we have the fishes that have cartilage, and then the fishes that are that have bones for the vertebrae. And so here I'm showing two different classes of these two different vertebrate fishes, and so these fishes will fall into the jawfish category. So both of these fishes have jaws. So at this point, we've evolved from jawless to jaw, and the difference between this guy over here versus this guy over here is that this skeleton for this shark right here is made with cartilage, whereas this skeleton right here, like this vertebrate, is actually made of bones. And so example of the cartilage fish, right, are sharks and rays and skates. And so you can actually see a shark jumping. This is a video if you're interested, just to be able to kind of actually see a shark jump, which is actually really interesting. You can look at some of the other cartilage fish here. So here you have a ray. Right here, this side we have a whalefish. So whalefishes are actually a filter feeder, and they tend to consume like plankton and other small fishes. While they're really big, they're actually known to be very gentle giants, so they don't pose any threat to human, which is probably why this diver is getting so close to the whalefish. Here we actually have chimeras, and informally known as ghostfish or ratfish, or sometimes spookfish. And then here, interestingly, this is called a mermaid's purse. So this is actually a shark's egg case. And so it's a protective pouch for developing shark embryos. So in here, you can actually see this little developing shark. And I guess they named it a mermaid pouch because it's supposed to look like a mermaid purse. I'm not sure. I have never seen a mermaid, nor a mermaid holding a purse. So I'm going to just believe that those sailors knew what they were doing when they named it mermaid's purse. But yeah, it's a little baby shark that's developing in there. Okay, so then for bony fishes, here are some examples of some bony fishes. And so the bony fishes, again, they also have a vertebrate, but the vertebrate is made of bones, and they are also have a jaw. They can be filter feeder, but they can also be opportunistic, and they can also be predator. And this includes fishes such as trout and salmon and haddock. So all these different fishes that we kind of recognize that we consume would fall into the category of bony fish. Additionally, they can have a swim bladder. So we can see the swim bladder here. And what the swim bladder is that it's this organ that is able to fill up with gas. And so that kind of helps them with their buoyancy, so they can actually maintain a specific depth of water without using too much energy on swimming. So as of right now, we're looking at animals that are like currently living in the water, right? So the next progression is actually moving toward land. So to be able to adapt to move on to land, we're going to focus on these next two animals, which is the lobe-finned fishes and the amphibian. So here, what we're going to start seeing is the development of lungs, as well as the development of fleshy appendages that are going to eventually become limbs. So for lobe-finned fish, as we're moving from water toward land, they start developing lung-like sac that helps them breathe once they're on land. And so here is a video of a modern lobe-finned fish if you are interested in observing. In addition to the lung-like sacs for breathing, we also start seeing the development of fleshy appendages that are evolving as an adaptation to land movement. And so if we look over here, we can see that this ancestral amphibian is starting to kind of develop what will eventually become appendages that will become adapted for being able to actually move onto land. So this is development of the lobe-finned fish, slowly moving toward the ancestral amphibian. And so now, once we move on to amphibian, we are now moving pretty much onto land, right? So from moving from water to land. And so we can see all these little cute amphibians here. There's quite a variety. And I think I'm fine here. There's this video that claims that they discovered a new amphibian. So if you're interested, I'll have the video linked and you can take a look at it. But yeah, I think this guy's really cute. He looks like he's just sunbathing. He looks so nice. I wish I could just sit outside and sunbathe all day in the sun. My favorite thing to do is to be able to take a nap outside and just bask in the sun. Unfortunately, life gets in the way, and so sometimes we have to do other things that we don't want to do instead of just sitting here enjoying the sun like this little amphibian does. So if we consider that ancestral-wise amphibians originated from, their common ancestor originated from water, the embryonic sac kind of makes sense because the embryonic sac, if you think about it, provides that similar environment for the embryo or the larval state, right? So the next evolutionary trend that we see is actually this embryonic egg. So actually having this egg that has a water environment when the young embryo is starting to develop. So amniotes are animals with embryos that actually develop inside a waterproof egg. So the egg on the outside is waterproof, and this egg eliminates the need of a water-enriched environment for the embryos to develop in. So you can see here, we have these cute little guys that are actually developing in the waterproof eggshell here. And so in the egg here themselves, this egg provides not only protection to developing embryo, but it will also provide all of the different nutrients and an environment for the embryos to develop. So this egg not only eliminates the need of a water environment, but as we mentioned, it's going to provide the developing embryo with food and water, and it's also going to provide with oxygen, as well as being able to actually remove nitrogenous waste. And the shell itself, right, the eggshell itself is going to be able to protect the embryo. And so this guy is a little reptile. So reptiles will fall under the amniotes, and it is believed that they were very abundant between 245 to 66 million years ago, and would include dinosaurs. Some of the characteristics that we're going to observe with reptiles is we start observing the bipedal stance. That's pre-adaptive before they start evolving wings in birds. Reptiles include turtles and crocodiles and snakes and lizards and also birds, right? And it would also include dinosaurs. They have, at this point, well-developed lungs to be able to adapt to living on the land and being able to have respiration, and that's going to be enclosed in the rib cage. Additionally, they tend to have 3-chambered hearts that is going to help them again with being able to actually get the oxygen to different parts of their body, that whole circulatory system. And reptiles are also ectothermic. So that means that the temperature in their body will match the outside. So to be able to regulate temperature, they have to actually move to either warmer or cooler area, depending on the environment that they're currently in. And so this guy is super cute. This one reminds me of Jurassic Park, but I think this guy's really cute. I hope he eats some of these plants and feels very happy and full. Okay. So the last evolutionary trend that we start seeing as we are moving into vertebrate is this development of mammary glands. So now trying to figure out a way to be able to support and feed the young. And so mammals will fall underneath this, and they have the mammary glands. So let's kind of take a look at that. So mammals are categorized as animals that are able to nourish their young with milk, right? They also tend to have either hair or fur, and mammals will often have different types of teeth depending on the type of food that they eat, right? So if we take a look at our pets at home, you'll see that your dog and cat will have very different type of teeth, right? They'll have like that canine teeth versus us. And then unlike reptiles who are ectoderm, mammals are endoderm. So that means that they can actually regulate their body temperature and it doesn't have to match the outside. So these two characteristics are the big ones that we tend to think of when we think of mammal, right? Nourishing young with milk. So if you recall in the lab, we had talked about how we have different enzymes that can actually help process that milk. So mammals are nourishing their young. Another one is the hair and fur. So this hair and fur can help with regards to heat loss by providing insulation. And then you have certain mammals that are, for example, marsupial, that are born in an immature state. So we can kind of see here, they're kind of born in an immature condition. And so these newborns tend to complete their development outside of the body, but inside a female pouch. So we can think of, for example, possums or kangaroos or koalas. These are examples of different mammals where they're born in an immature condition and then they will develop inside the female's pouch. So the vast majority of living mammals will have placenta, and we've talked about the embryonic egg. So you can kind of envision that this placenta is basically a modification where we have this extra embryonic membrane that is modified to become internal development, right? So now we're internally developing kind of like this, similar to the egg, this environment that allows the embryo to be able to grow and develop and provides nutrients for the developing embryo, as well as eliminate any waste that the embryo is producing. And additionally, it provides protection for that developing embryo, right? So in the next section of this lecture, we'll start visiting human evolution.